Welcome back, guys. So they had sold you the lie for nearly 2 centuries. They told you the state school was your ladder to reform, the great equalizer, the only path to becoming a useful citizen. But the man who designed the entire machine never put his own children on the assembly line. Let's break it down.
The curtains rise, the lights burn bright. You're blinded now, can't see the fight. Smoke and mirrors, they lead the way. Fooling hearts night after day. Welcome to the show, it's all pretend. The smiles, the lies, the perfect end.
All right, and welcome back to another episode of Breaking the System. I am your host. Thanks for tuning in tonight to episode 59, The Architect's Exit Strategy. And tonight, we're going to try to go a little deep, all the way back to the Prussian blueprint. We talked about these guys before. Through the halls of power and into the mansions of billionaires and straight to the quiet choice the elites have always made for their own blood. If the people who built, expanded, and defend this system refuse to let it touch their kids, what does that tell you about its real purpose? So let's look at the father who owned this machine. We're going to talk about Horace Mann. Horace Mann. Horace Mann, the so-called father of American public education. And in 1843, he sailed to Prussia, not hunting for wisdom or enlightenment, but for control. And he came back obsessed with their military-style system. Compulsory attendance, age-graded rows, bells that fractured attention every 50 minutes, and one correct answer drilled into every head. Sounds pretty familiar, right? Yeah. And he lobbied for this really hard, and by 1852, one of the first states, Massachusetts, passed the first compulsory attendance law in America. Police could now knock on your door and take your child if you didn't hand them over to this factory. Mann called it the common school. It was free. It was universal. It was non-sectarian. He sold it as the bedrock of democracy. And yet, while he was busy standardizing everyone else's children, Horace Mann and his wife, what did they do? Well, they homeschooled their own 3 sons. They gave them the classics, real logic, the freedom to think deeply and to lead, the fireside education, so to speak. No rows, no bells, and definitely not into the machine. And so if the architect wouldn't trust his own creation with his own blood, why the hell should you trust it with yours? And that hypocrisy didn't die with man. It became another pattern within the system. Okay? And so let's look at the Prussian blueprint for a minute. Like I said, we've talked about the Prussians before. Prussia didn't invent this education system. It invented management. And after military defeats, they wanted a couple things. They wanted obedient soldiers, they wanted compliant workers, and they wanted local bureaucrats. Loyal local bureaucrats. They did not want independent thinkers who might question the state. Oh, that would be bad, right? Someone who thinks? Yeah. They perfected the tool that we still live with. The bell to break concentration. age grading to isolate kids from older mentors, standardized testing, which as an educator I really hate, to rank and sort, and state-trained teachers to deliver official narrative, right? If you're trained by the state on what and how to teach, they pretty much control what is being taught to your kids, okay? Not saying that that's not important, right? But we got to stand back and take a critical look at this stuff. And so Mann imported wholesale and other states followed. The goal wasn't to create architects of tomorrow. It was to produce reliable parts for the industrial machine. And it worked. Generations still learn to sit still, to follow directions, and to wait for the next bell. But the children of our legislators who voted for compulsion, what about them? The kids of the industrialists who funded this idea, what about them? They were rarely in those rows. They had tutors. They had private academies, homes. The blueprint was never meant for everyone equally. But isn't that how they sold it to us? Right? It is. Okay. So let's fast forward to the modern era. The people who signed the big education bills. The ones pushing No Child Left Behind and Race to the Top and Common Core, endless test mandates. Almost never subject their own children to the system that they defend. Let's look at some patterns. We like patterns. I like history, okay? Let's look at Barack Obama. His daughters, they went to Sidwell Friends, and that is a private Quaker school with tuitions now pushing upwards of $60,000 plus a year. Can you afford that? I know I can't. Let's look at Bill Clinton. His daughter Chelsea switched to Sidwell when he entered the White House after some public school time in Arkansas. So she was in public school for a while. But why not? Why didn't she stay there? She too good for it? Okay. I mean, she's got Secret Service. They could protect her. And if not, well, then they're not doing their jobs, right? What about Richard Nixon? His daughters also attended Sidwell. Al Gore, his kids went to elite private schools. And many others from both parties have chosen places like Groton, Phillips Exeter, Phillips Andover, Choate, Dalton, or similar prep schools that cost more per month than most of us American families earn in an entire year. School for everyone? I think not. Even politicians who rail against public school choice or voucher programs for undermining public education often send their own kids to private. Yeah. What about Biden's son to Arkhamir Academy? Nancy Pelosi's son to elite boarding schools? Kamala Harris's stepkids to expensive private options? The rare exception, right? And he is a rare exception. This president, I wasn't around when he was president, but I absolutely love this guy. Like, especially in his older years, like he has done a lot for the homeless. He has built a lot of homes. Like, he is a very giving guy. And so this rare exception would be Jimmy Carter. And he sent his daughter Amy to D.C. public school. And it was treated as some like bold, symbolic act because it was so unusual for a sitting president to do this. But why? Why? And for most, security is always an excuse, but security doesn't explain why the curriculum at the elite schools looks nothing like the Prussian conveyor belt, like the public school system. They still teach elements of the trivium, which is grammar, mastering fundamentals, logic. They teach spot fallacies and to think clearly, and rhetoric. They look at command ideas and how to persuade and how to lead. They train kids to write the rules, to design the systems, and to run the rooms, while the public track trains kids to what? To obey them. System makes sense once you start digging just a little bit, okay? And it's not hypocrisy by accident. It's a quiet admission. The machine is good enough for other people's children, but not theirs. And the pattern didn't stop at politicians. The ultra-wealthy, the tech billionaires, the CEOs, the hedge funders are even more aggressive about their exit. Many send their kids to ultra-elite privates like Harvard, Westlake, Dalton, Exeter, places surrounded by an embarrassment of riches and resources, and they have small classes and they have real mentorship. But an increasing number are going further, building their own little micro schools or even homeschooling them outright. And especially in Illinois, what's been under the pen lately? What's been under the magnifying glass? Homeschooling. Last year, they really tried to attack homeschools and making sure that homeschools had a curriculum and you had to check in with the state and you had to tell the state what you're teaching and when and where and why. And so let's look at Elon Musk. I like the guy for what he's built, but what about his kids? He pulled his kids from traditional private school and helped create Odd Astra, or later Astra Nova, custom learning environments focused on deep problem solving, not standardized testing. Makes one scratch their heads, right? What about Mark Zuckerberg? He has run a small private Montessori style school out of his own properties for his children and for a handful of others. Jeff Bezos, well, he has funded innovative preschool models. And other Silicon Valley heavyweights have backed these micro schools or these homeschool co-ops or alternative programs that emphasize self-directed learning, critical thinking, and real-world skills. And they pour billions into disrupting or reforming education while ensuring their own kids never ride the public factory line. They know the difference between being processed and being prepared to build the next system. The rich are not magically smarter. They simply refuse to let the state raise their children. It's an interesting debate to look into. They choose the fireside, the customized, the high agency, rooted in logic and mastery, over the bell-to-bell minutes. And when you sit back and you look at it, you really do see the system that's at play, right? These dogs are crazy. And so this isn't some grand conspiracy with secret handshakes, right? It is a choice, a pattern that's been repeated for 170 plus years. And the architects knew real education, the kind that produces whole human beings instead of standardized parts, right? I mean, when we go back and look at what public education is for, it was for the public to start working in factories. It was never meant for the public to start becoming managers and owners and leaders of their own right, of their own design, right? It was never made. It was never meant to be like that, okay? And so, at home, in small, high-trust environments with classics, logic, debate, and freedom to question is where the architects send their kids. And the elites aren't a superior bloodline. They just had the resources and the clarity to reject their own creation for the people that they valued the most, which is their kids, their bloodline, right? Who is going to inherit their throne and all their money and all their wealth and all their power? They're not going to give it to you or I. It's supposed to be passed down from generation to generation, just like it was in the medieval times, right? And just like it was hundreds of years before that. And so you don't need their money or their permission to do the same. What can we do? Well, turn off the screen. Silence the bells. Reclaim the fireside. Teach your kids how to think, not what to think. Kind of like what we do here. Give them the tools the architects kept for their own. If Horace Mann wouldn't trust the machine with his sons, if presidents and billionaires quietly opt out while preaching the system for everyone else, why are you still feeding your children into it? And so, like, as a population, as a populace, as a culture, as a society, as a nation, once again, we have to take a step back and we have to look at what is working and what is not working. And we're not even in the top 10 in the world. We're not even in the top 30, I don't think. I think we're like 35 or 37 in the world as far as education and how smart our kids are. So evidently this system is not working. It's not producing the kind of intellectual property that the rest of the world is doing, right? And so we take a step back and we ask ourselves, why? What are we doing wrong? The standardized testing, we're not critically thinking, we're not asking questions, we're not pushing the envelope, right? It's a multiple choice question. And if you provide all of the choices, they don't have to think about anything. All of the choices are right there. Is it A, B, C, or D? Well, what if it's not any of those? Where is the critical thinking coming into play? Where is the debating and the conversation and all of those tools that future generations need to become critical thinkers? It's not there. And we can throw millions and hundreds of millions and billions of dollars into this type of education, and you're going to keep getting the exact same thing. Day in and day out, year after year, generation after generation, decade after decade. Okay? You just are. It's the way that it's designed. It's the way it's going to work. And so likewise, let's leave off with a critical thinking question. I hope you guys have questions. I hope you leave comments in the comment section so we can come back and converse more on this later. I would love to hear ideas on how we can correct this, how we can move forward, how we can kind of like maybe equalize this a little more. And like I said, I work in public education. I love working in public education. I love teaching the future generation of tomorrow, right? But it's not working. The current system is not working. And where do we get our books? Read up on that. Read up on who has been writing the books and who they're associated with, right? The files came out, they're associated to him. Like, do we want those kinds of books? Because that's what writes history. History is wrote by the victor. Books are wrote by the victor. And if you think that we are learning all of history the right way, you're wrong. There are so many key points in history that are left out, that are not talked about, that are skipped over, that are very, very important for generations to know, to pass on what we do and don't do. It's not there. We don't learn about it. We don't teach it. Okay? And so our critical thinking question is, if the founders, expanders, defenders, and wealthiest beneficiaries of the compulsory public education system have, for generations, consistently refused to put their own children through the full Prussian-style machine that they built or sustained, what does that reveal about its true purpose? Don't be biased. Sit back and really think about it. What does that reveal about public education, about its true purpose? Why is it built? Why is it made the way that it's made? Okay? And more importantly, knowing this pattern, what specific steps are you, as an individual, as a citizen, as a parent, willing to take to give your own children or future children the education that the architects reserved for theirs? How are you going to give them the same education that the millionaires are getting, that the CEO is giving, that Horace Mann gave to his kids? And that's an even more important question. Because remember, it's built by a village. Okay? Can't do it alone. It takes the whole village. Right? And if you're not willing to partake, then maybe you should leave the village. Right? So, with that, stay dangerous, stay inquisitive, stop asking for permission to think or to walk away. Always converse. This is Breaking the System. I'm your host. God bless. Have a good night. We'll see you guys next time. Peace.
Yeah. It don't rot overnight, you know.